Okay, this is the conclusion for the whole course. I hope you enjoyed it and found it rewarding. For me, it's been fascinating. The idea was to present Greek Jewry a little bit with a historical introduction and to show the diversity of Greek Jewry during the modern state, and with some exceptions of Jewish communities which were in the Greek peninsula who later became part of Greece, like Rhodes. So for most of the history of modern Greece, Rhodes was not part of Greece, but it's geographically part of Greece today. So in the course, we talked a lot about the Romaniot communities, especially in the west of Greece, in Ioannina, at Corfu. We talked about the culture. Obviously, we highlighted Salonika and the Sephardic culture, the Judeo-Spanish culture, the language, the newspapers, the press, the theater, the politics, the relations between the Ottomans and then the Greek Orthodox, the decline of the community. We talked about the Sephardic culture, how it proliferated in the Ottoman period, especially under modernization. And then it continued in the Greek period, but because of the political events and the emigration, the community dwindled. Also politically, because Greek national culture was accentuated, that was at the expense of Sephardic and other particularistic cultures in Greece. We talked about tensions between Greek Orthodox and Jews, and we talked about common harmony and influences. You heard a lot about various creations. You heard about Judeo-Greek. You heard about research and poetry by Joseph Matzos. You heard about the Greek Jewish, national Greek poet Yosef Eliyahu, who died at the age of about 30, who was a Jew from Ioannina, who actually was ostracized because he was a communist. He died of illness, but he was a high school teacher in Kilkis, north of Salonika, but he was a front row Greek literary figure. He wrote in many encyclopedias and many literary reviews. He did poetry. He tried to present Jewish culture, classical Jewish religious culture and philosophy, to a Greek audience. He did a lot in his short time as a young adult of 10 years. Then we had the Judeo-Spanish cultural icons. We talked about Mordechai Yonah, who was a Judeo-Spanish minstrel. We talked about the composers. We talked about the loss of the community. We talked about the loss during the Holocaust of Greek Jewry. We talked about the various occupations. We talked about the loss of the majority of the Jews of Salonika, some of their heroism in the Sonderkommando revolt in Birkenau and in Warsaw. We talked about Greek Jewish and Salonican Jewish medical victims, men and women. We talked a little bit about what happened to Greek Jewry after the war, some of their accomplishments, where they remained. In general, we also focused on the particular cultures. So you heard a lot more than usual about the Italian Jewish culture of Corfu and the Ionian Islands. We heard about the Jews that died in the Greek Revolution in the Peloponnese and in Attica in 1821, where 11 Jewish communities were destroyed, totaling about 5,000 people. You heard a little bit about Greek Jewry in the 19th century, in the Athens area, in Chalkis, in Thessaly. You heard about the Jewish communities in Thrace, mostly Sephardic communities in northern eastern Greece. You heard to what happened to them in the Holocaust under the Bulgarians. You heard about the sinking of the Karageorgi boat and how the others were annihilated in Treblinka. In Thrace, though, we talked a little bit about the history of the Jews in Komotini and in Kavala. You heard about Jews in small towns like Ditamotiko or Soufli in that area of northeastern Greece. You heard about the Jews of Kastoria in western Greece. You heard about small Romaniot communities like in Chalkis near Athens, or in Arta in Preveza, as well as Ioannina. You heard about various personalities from Ioannina, like David Shon Effendi Levi, who was a banker and was in the Ottoman Parliament. You heard about Greek Jews from Salonika who were in the Greek Parliament and were politicians. You heard about the anti-Jewish legislation, how the Jews were forced not to work on Sunday, and then they had to give up the Sabbath in some cases, and how they migrated. About the big fire in Salonika in 1917 and its disastrous effects, and how it displaced most of the Jews of the city, and how they got shafted by Venizelos and they didn't get their property back. You heard about the adverse effects of the Asia Minor refugees and the legislation against the Sabbath and the riots, the Campbell riots, where they burned down a Greek Jew, a fisherman and porter neighborhood, and then that prompted the Aliyah, the immigration, to Eretz Yisrael in the 30s, primarily to Tel Aviv. You heard about, because of the Depression and the Depression of 1929, you heard about the migration to France of Salonican Jews and other Greek Jews. And in general, we also talked about the Civil War, about the Cold War, and then about how after the Cold War ended and Papandreou came into power, how Greek Jewry and the Holocaust could be accentuated, how the partisans could be accentuated because they were taboo during the Cold War. And there are many other things that I didn't mention in this conclusion that were in the course. Obviously, you can expand upon it. You can contact me in the future. It's a fascinating thing, and I hope it's enriched you.